my name is Susan Miranda, and I am the oboist with the Chione Quintet. We are so excited to share with you the composer that we have chosen to commission for our part in the Breathe Collective. We have chosen to work with Dr. Gary Powell Nash, who is a professor at Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee. Hi, Gary. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
I was born and raised in Flint, Michigan. I started taking piano lessons at age 6. I then started the clarinet in 4th grade band, and I consider it my major instrument. I also started playing tenor saxophone in the 8th grade and tuba in the 10th grade. I also played contrabass bugle in the 10th grade as a member of the Flint, Michigan Royal Airs Drum and Bugle Corps. I also learned about jazz improvisation as a rising high school sophomore as I attended Genesee County Fine Arts Camp. I have my bachelor's in music ed from Michigan State University, master's in music composition from Western Michigan University, and PhD in composition from Michigan State University. My first full-time teaching gig was at Mississippi Valley State University from 1996 to 2003. I also spent the 2000-2001 academic year in Philippines as I was a U.S. Fulbright Scholar and visiting professor of music composition at University of Philippines, Diliman. I moved to Nashville, Tennessee in 2003 for my current post at Fisk University. In regards to composition, I credit my learning about jazz improvisation combined with my initial interest in the visual arts as I did several drawings and paintings up through high school. At first, I wanted to be a jazz composer and recording artist, and then, during my freshman year at Michigan State University, I heard the music of Carl Husa, and I decided that I wanted to compose music like that one day.
Fantastic, thank you. Would you let us know kind of how you might describe your music and maybe how you move through your process?
I describe my music as neo-romantic, bordering on avant-garde. In regards to the second part of that question, it depends on the project. Much of my music is derived from personal experiences and my reflecting those same experiences into my music. For example, during my 7 years in Mississippi, I composed Brass Magnolia Suite for trumpet, horn, bass trombone, and percussion / jazz drum set, and I composed 3 Ivory Magnolia Fantasies for piano solo, both based on Mississippi Delta blues music. During the 2006-2007 academic year, I was blessed to have been able to visit the countries of Vietnam, Spain, and Ghana, and I composed works based on and inspired by my travels to those places. Most of the works were composed between 2008 and 2015 and utilized West African music, although I did write one Vietnam and one Spain-inspired piece. Most of my music is composed intuitively. However, I've also done a few systematic works, such as the one for this project.
So I know we sent you just a little bit of information about the collective and kind of what Breathe has meant to the 4 quintets that are a part of the collective. What inspired you to join this project with us?
In actuality, it was mostly you reaching out to me after our initial Facebook meeting. With that said, I also looked at both the Breathe collection and the Chione Quintet pages and became intrigued with the mission statements for both groups, particularly in regards to diversity, inclusion, and social justice.
Thank you. What out of, all of the events of 2020, there have been many, how has that affected your music or your composition process?
My best response to that question is the COVID-19 pandemic, which has caused me to focus more on composing works that are no larger than trios. In regards to process, I'm always trying to balance accessibility and playability, meaning that I can push the limits a little more. In regards to how the events since March have affected me personally, for starters, I had to complete the spring semester of 2020 at Fisk University, teaching it virtually and remotely at home. I also had to supervise my two kids as they continued their respective semesters virtually. My wife was not able to work for about 3 months, and she needed to deal with getting unemployment compensation during that time. In regards to the racial equality, diversity, inclusion, I posted my initial thoughts on Facebook, and I discussed my overall feelings of anger, sadness, and sorrow. I was especially moved when I saw the news clip of a young black American gentleman from Minnesota, I think, who said, "All I want to do is be able to walk through a white neighborhood and not be harassed." I was also prompted to follow through on social justice related projects that I had started long before the incidences, such as a symphony based on U.S. civil rights music of the 1960s and my continuous work with grade school students through music.
How have the events of the last year, 2020, since March, how have they affected your personal life and you personally?
Interestingly enough, I also had white friends whom I knew from my undergraduate collegiate years. They apologized to me for either acts of racial insensitivity or being complicit in acts of racial insensitivity toward me during that time. The truth is, neither of those individuals really showed any racial insensitivity or any other acts along those lines toward me, yet they felt compelled to apologize to me.
How do you see the piece that you're writing for Keone invoking Breathe's mission?
My composition was written under the premise creation of new works for winds that illuminate the significance of breath in an ongoing cultural narrative about systemic racism, police brutality against the black community, and the impact of COVID-19. My piece is titled Stop for Equity, and it's based on the numbers 846, representing 8 minutes and 46 seconds that former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin had his knee on George Floyd's neck.
Wow, that's really interesting and impactful. What are you hoping that audiences take away from your composition?
For this, as well as any other of my compositions, I want listeners, as well as performers, to have some type of reaction. Ideally, I hope it's a positive reaction. I believe it was Igor Stravinsky or something written about Stravinsky who said, "You'll either like my music or hate my music. However, you'll never be bored with it." For me, that means the worst thing for me is if someone were to be indifferent toward my music.
Huh, interesting. What aspect of 2020 do you hope that carries over into future years as far as maybe music composition or just everything that musicians and ensembles are going through this last year?
I hope to have a consistent flow of performances, sales, and possibly commissions for new works, as I've had roughly since June. Myself and several other composer colleagues of color have had more folks approach us about our music, as well as musicians. In fact, I had 75 individuals purchase my composition, A Million Numbered Streets for Oboe Solo. It's a 1 minute composition. I didn't have any purchases of that piece prior to June 2020. During that time, I also had 40 purchases of my composition titled 9 New York City Miniatures, which I actually wrote, is actually based on A Million Numbered Streets. I just wrote 8 more miniatures around it, and so now that composition is titled 9 New York City Miniatures, and it absorbed 1,000,000 number streets.
Now I know as a Twin Cities ensemble, we Chione members have just been right in the heart of the start of this movement, and it was interesting to me personally, the choice that you made as far as using 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Can you elaborate on that a little bit, and why you made that choice, and what, just kind of what that means to you as a composer and a person of color?
For the most part, my prior composition is in 7/8 time signature, and I like to work with asymmetrical meters along with mixed meters whenever I can. One item that inspired me to use 8/4/6, that is the numbers 8/4/6 referencing 8 minutes and 46 seconds, was my 9-year-old daughter and the effect that the George Floyd incident had on her. She drew a picture that I posted on both my Facebook page and timeline. I also took her out to ride her bicycle once, and she told me that she wanted to ride her bike for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, for just one that day, that is. 8/4/6 in my composition is seen mostly through the time signatures of 8/8, that is patterns of 3 plus 3 plus 2, 2 plus 3 plus 3, and 3 plus 2 plus 3, then 4/8 and 3/4 used successively. I also take the motive and repeat it 8 times, then 4 times, and then 6 times. The title Stop for Equity also represents 8/4/6. A stop sign is an octagon, which has 8 sides, 4 being a homophone for 4, the number, and an equity having 6 letters. In response to that very last sentence, as stated before, I'm all for social justice, racial equality, and inclusion, and I'm always looking to demonstrate that whenever I can, within reason. Being a composer of color allows me to speak even more to that.